It's an evolution of the sport, isn't it? I think it's, in every sense, it's gone from an amateur to a professional sport. I mean, every year it's becoming more professional. I think the players are becoming more professional. There's more money going into the sport. Therefore, players are able to, say, focus on S&C, sports and conditioning, bringing trainers with them. And I think the organisation side of padel as well is just going through that process.
Tom, we're here with another podcast episode today, talking about something that is a hot topic with a lot of people, I would say, down the recreational side and talking about people at the clubs, and that is, will padel become an Olympic sport?
Yeah, it's something that we get asked all the time. It's something that I think players just want to happen, don't they? Players have picked up padel, they've played it, and in a way they can't believe it's not an Olympic sport yet. So today we're going to talk about when or if it's going to become an Olympic sport.
I think it's really difficult because the general club player is playing with their friends and they're going, this is so exciting. They're in a bubble of players that are really enthusiastic about the sport. They love it. They say it's exploding, around the world, but they don't see it like we see it in terms of playing FIP tournaments. So FIP is the International Padel Federation, playing those type of tournaments. I mean, we're recently back from the Euro Cup 2025, organised by the FIP, and also I obviously see a lot of Premier when it comes to, the broadcasting for Red Bull and the events around the world. And so I think really you need to understand that side of it, the governance side of the sport, if you want to understand whether it would become an Olympic sport or not.
Yeah, and let's jump into the different organisations that sit behind padel. So we have the FIP, and that's been running or being part of the sport in terms of the organisation for quite a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as long as I've played the game, so the last 15 odd years, it's been essentially the organiser. The equivalent in tennis would be like the ITF, and it's the organiser behind the European Championships, behind the World Championships, behind a lot of the I was going to say lower level professional tournaments around the world. So that is essentially the organiser, the governing body. And then you've got Premier Padel now, which is the professional tour. So equivalent of ATP, WTA tour for the professionals.
Yeah, okay. And so if we look at the FIP in particular, we came back from the Euro Cup that was organised by the FIP, and a lot of we call them FIPs actually, but they are professional tournaments, have played international tournaments this year, which we call FIPs. Let's look into a bit of that, because that's such a big part of this wider conversation around the Olympics, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's really difficult for people to understand because maybe they watch Premier and they look at that, and now the broadcast with Red Bull looks fantastic, right? And it looks like a really professional event, and you're seeing a lot on socials, the highlight reels, but they don't really see what's going on at these tournaments. And I've been involved in FIP tournaments for the last 12, 15 years, like going to European Championships, World Championships, and they are gradually getting more organised. I think it was a really big turning point when the kind of Qatari investment got involved, and we held the first World Championships in Doha and then the next one in Dubai. And there are two countries that really do a great job of organisation. Everything was so well organised. It was within a tennis stadium and set up, so it was already set up really well. All the catering, everything was really on point, good change rooms, high quality of everything. But then the rest of the tournaments are not really like that, are they? I mean, if we come back from the Euro Cup, recently, it's like, we got 1 hour of practice court before the actual event starts. The hotels are kind of booked with players and coaches all over the place. It's a little bit of a mess, and I don't think that people realise that when they are watching it on TV. And I think that's the difference between being an amateur sport and being a professional sport, is the governance of this international federation.
Yeah, it's an evolution of the sport, isn't it? I think it's, in every sense, it's gone from an amateur to a professional sport. I mean, every year it's becoming more professional. I think the players are becoming more professional. There's more money going into the sport. Therefore, players are able to, say, focus on S&C, sports and conditioning, bringing trainers with them. And I think the organisation side of padel as well is just going through that process. If I look at the Euro Cup, like you say, it was a little bit random, wasn't it? There was a lot of random things in there, like a bit disorganised. I mean, if we look at, say, there was two venues, wasn't there? There was one venue which was in the ball ring in La Linea, and what an amazing facility. But there were 3 courts in there, and then there was another court somewhere else. And if I think back to my tennis days, so playing on I'd say even like the junior circuit, so played in junior international tournaments from the age of about 13 up to age 18, and I was travelling around, I suppose the equivalent of what paddle players are doing on the professional scene now, or FIP Promises, I think is sort of similar to that. I mean, everything was so well organised, and as you went up the levels it became even more organised. And I find it interesting comparing my tennis days to paddle, because it feels like paddle is still going through that professionalism sort of stage.
Well, if we look at the Euro Cup, I mean, we didn't actually know where it was being played until like less than a couple of months before we actually had to go.
Yeah.
We played the qualifying for the event not knowing where the final stages were going to be. And actually there was the Asian tour going on at the same time, so each region will have its own cup essentially. And fortunately for them, they're hosted by some of these Middle Eastern countries, whether it's Doha or Dubai. They both do a fantastic job, and it's almost like it really depends on that host. And I mean, you've played on some of the biggest stages. Well, you won Junior Wimbledon, right? It doesn't get bigger than playing on on those grandstand courts and all of the organisation that goes around that. And I think, not that we are expecting all of the events to be like that. We have to also appreciate it's a young sport, it's coming up, and when everyone goes, oh well, it should be an Olympic sport because them and their friends in the club are playing it, you've also got to understand there's a lot of the governance that goes around it. It's like, the anti-doping needs to align with the Olympic Committee, and that's part of it. The Federation, the FIP, needs to align with the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, and things like gender equality, anti-doping, all of that those kind of guidelines are being made with the FIP, but are not there yet, right?
And what was it like as a coach? So if you're at the Euro Cup finals, obviously I was in the GB men's team, you were the coach. What's it like as a coach when it is pretty disorganised? I mean, you were staying in a separate hotel to us, and which was a 20-minute walk away from our hotel. You had to come to our hotel each evening for dinner. It felt, from our side, and this is a bit of an uncontrollable, but it felt like we weren't as connected as a team because of that. I don't know what it felt like for you as a coach.
I mean, well, my personality anyway. I like to be organised, and I find it really frustrating when you go to an event and you don't know what the plan is. Like I like to have practice courts booked ahead of time, knowing where we can get the balls, knowing what time the transport will be. All of these things, especially if you're the coach, because you're almost responsible for the team. So it's like you want to make sure that everyone is in the right place at the right time, and plus, in the men's team, we want to go and support the women's matches and vice versa, and it's difficult as a coach or an organizer trying to organize within those events if you don't know, and quite often, the organizers themselves don't often know.
Yeah, and so if we look at, say, going back to where we started was around the Olympics and what's required for paddle to make it into an Olympic sport. Like you mentioned there's around governance and recognition with the IOC, but there's also around participation, isn't there, and popularity. And I mean, paddle does a pretty good job of almost selling itself in that sense. I think the popularity and the participation, that's going to come almost naturally, isn't it? As more courts come up, more countries are going to play.
I think we're probably there in terms of participation, because I think if I'm not mistaken, it's around like 70 countries for men's and 40 or 45 for women, right? Yeah. Different countries need to be participating across 4 continents, I think it is. And I actually think, we're there in terms of, number of countries registered as a nation with the FIP. I think we're probably there. I think a lot of it has to do with the host country as well. So it's LA in 2028 and Brisbane in 2032. Both of those countries are not big paddle countries. If it was, for example, a Spain or an Argentina or even a Sweden, Italy, Portugal, these are all countries that paddle is now one of the most popular sports in that country. You feel like the host nation might select that, whereas in the US, it's really early days, and the same with Australia. So that will also probably play into it a little bit as well.
It says here around growth in viewership, participation and youth engagement. And I look at youth engagement, I think, are emerging countries, are they there yet? If I think of the UK, I'm sure there are junior players playing the game, but I know that's definitely an area that probably isn't being maximised, mainly because we don't have enough courts and adults are kind of dominating the utilisation of courts, really. I mean, they want to get on court first, and it's hard enough to book a court. I'm sure people listening or watching are thinking it's hard for me to book a court even a week in advance in the UK. So I don't know how much emphasis is around this youth engagement, but I know that participation, I agree, I think we're there, but I wonder how much emphasis is on this youth engagement, because I know that in a lot of countries that's not yet there yet, particularly in emerging countries.
Yeah, and I think it's partly, like you said, occupation level on the court, and I think probably expense as well. Like a club probably wants juniors to play, but when adults are paying full price, it's quite difficult for them to make it half price or to make it very reasonable for kids to try the sport. And I think if we look at the UK, we're starting to see juniors come through now in pockets in the country where clubs are putting a little bit more focus into the juniors, but it requires the clubs to do that just because there are not enough courts. And I think the nations that are further ahead of us but still emerging, like Netherlands, for example, or some of the Scandinavian countries, they now have enough courts that juniors are getting a bit of a look in, and the organisation of the clubs and academies is a little bit more organised, a bit more proficient, and so juniors are getting to play. So I'm sure it is a big factor, though.
I don't want to go off topic here, but on that focus of juniors, is that because other countries like the Netherlands are focusing more on grassroots and thinking long term about the sport? Whereas, would you say that in other countries they're thinking of the sport more of a business, and how can I make as much money from these courts?
I think it's a difficult one, and it's a little bit like our result in the Euro Cup. Like we did well for where we are as a nation in terms of, we probably finished, whatever it might be, 5th or 6th, because we beat Sweden in the final match. But where we are as a nation, we just need more courts, more players, more coaches. We just need more of everything. And, it's very easy to look at the results and say, oh, well, Great Britain should be doing a lot better, often by people who don't really understand the sport or actually the top end of the sport in the country. But for where we are in terms of, the number of everything, it's like that's what needs to grow, and it's coming. I mean, we're over the course of the year putting in, for example, another 1,000 courts is going to make a big difference in terms of number of juniors that can play, number of adults that can play, number of coaches that are training up. It will all hopefully come together. Yeah,
I mean, I think there has to be an emphasis on that, though. I think, I don't want to stray too far from the topic, but I think this idea of grassroots has to come in early, because I think I agree, I think the more courts it will happen, but I also think that it won't necessarily, like, just on its own. I think there has to be a push for that. But it'd be interesting with this Olympics, and if it comes in, how much focus there is on youth engagement. The other bits that they focus on is around the commercials as well. I know that the commercial side is also a big thing for being admitted into the Olympics. I mean, when I speak to some people, they look at other sports and they say, well, surfing is in the Olympics, skateboarding is in the Olympics, and I know there's other, perhaps kind of niche sports that have gone in. So I'm sure some people are listening to this thinking, how is paddle not guaranteed already in there? But you have to tick all these boxes, don't you?
Yeah, and you forget the rapid growth of paddle, right? Like a lot of these countries 5-6 years ago had a handful of courts. So it's almost like the participation is growing so quickly, but the international federations they need to catch up. And another part of it with the Olympics is having a good gender balance, and that's something that often in countries it's very male dominated initially, and it takes a little bit more time for the female participation to catch up. And I'd say in the UK we're not at 50-50. I mean, we are closer now than we were a year or two ago, but I think there's still a fairly big difference. And I think that clubs and nations and federations have to work hard to try and make that balance.
And it's tough, isn't it? Because this is a new sport that if you look at, say, other sports, tennis, golf, they've been so established, football, rugby, like all of these different sports, it's very rare to find a really, for a lot of countries, a brand new sport, and you have to go through that whole evolutionary process again, don't you? Like we're talking about, gender, equality in terms of participation, and then you've got other aspects like the grassroots. I mean, in a way, clubs are having to really learn this for the first time. If people that have a tennis club, for example, then they're not having to think about too much about some of these things because it's already been established for years and years in their country. But so I think that's quite interesting with this, is that clubs that are opening, it's a brand new sport. They're having to start all the way again from stage one, and it will be a challenge, won't it? And
I think also a lot of club owners are brand new to this space. Like, how many club owners do we speak to that have no paddle background? This is their first club they've ever opened, even for a sports club a lot of the time. And so they're learning as they're going, and they're also trying to learn, how can we get more girls participating to increase the number for the gender balance, or how do we get more juniors on court? And these are all teething processes for clubs that they need to go through, almost on a national, international scale, in order to meet a lot of this criteria.
So what's going to stop paddle getting into the Olympics? Because I feel like we're talking about this like it's a bit of a done deal in terms of where we're at. It's going to grow. Surely it's getting into the Olympics. Talk about other sports that are already in. Is it a done deal or not?
I think it will happen. The question will be when. And I think it will happen mainly because you're getting bigger federations, and a good example is like the LTA. Like, the LTA getting involved means that they will have more input into the FIP regulations, for example. They're going to have more input. They've already got guidelines for, like gender, for anti-doping, for all these type of things, that they will almost help guide FIP, I think, in the right direction. And understandably, the FIP knows that. And I think these big federations that are coming on board will help almost find the right path. So if it's not in the next couple of Olympics, I have no doubt that it will get there at some point.
And what's the actual benefit of being in the Olympics? I mean, I know that's the topic of this conversation, but is it just a case of we'll get to watch paddle in the Olympics and players will have a shot for gold, silver, or bronze? Is that? But it's not the only implication of this being admitted into the Olympics, is it?
Well, I think that's almost, in a way, the least of it. I think it's more that it will be the visibility, like the actual awareness of the sport, because so many people tune into the Olympics. I mean, it's the first time, I watch things like, the speed climbing and these different events is on the Olympics. I wouldn't normally watch that stuff, and there'll be loads of people that watch paddle that might not normally watch it. I think it's another massive benefit because it means that you will get government funding in a lot of different countries, and also the host nation will make a big effort to build those facilities in that nation, and therefore it's almost like it will give a push to countries to grow paddle, so that they can compete on the Olympic stage.